My passion in Toastmasters has become coaching. And one thing, if you've ever coached or taught, you have to know what you're doing before you can teach someone else. And I've learned, trust me, I have learned from many mistakes. In my contest history, I have done very poorly, and there's a reason for that. I didn't pay attention to what the judges were looking for. Tonight, we're going to talk about storytelling and how it is important, not just for contests, but just in your Toastmaster experience. Let me share a quote with you. I'm going to paraphrase this. It's from Pam Neely. Storytelling is the oldest way of human beings to convey messages. Ancient people use storytelling. There's storytelling in the Bible. Your grandfather told stories, and his grandfather before him, and his grandfather before him. You've been telling stories all your life. You may not be aware of it. You've been telling stories in your personal life. You've been telling stories at work. You are a storyteller. Now it's time to do what I've been doing last year, and that's figure out what is the art of storytelling. What is it that makes people such good storytellers? And if you don't think storytelling is important in Toastmasters, I challenge you to go and watch the World Championship of Public Speaking. It is not the World Championship of Public Speaking. It is the World Championship of, yes, you guessed it, storytelling. These people are phenomenal storytellers. They've mastered it. And I've watched them. It's fun. It's really fun to go and watch them. And I challenge you, when we're done in the next few days, go and watch some of these people and you'll see what I'm talking about. They are absolute masters at what we're going to talk about tonight. Let's start with Toastmasters 101. What I would like you to do in the chat is put down what are the 3 structures of a good speech. When you write a speech, there's 3 main components. What are those main components of a speech? If you guys could write that in the chat, we'll give everyone a minute or two. See, that the nice thing is we have a small crowd, so if you don't participate, I get to call on you. It's an old teacher trick. Just having fun. And of course, you guys have all been well trained, well versed in the speech writing of Toastmasters. Look at that. Every single one of you that I can see has got this down. Well, here's the good news. Storytelling is exactly the same structure. We call it something different. Storytelling is broken down into 3 acts. Act number 1 is the conflict. Just like in the beginning of a speech, you want to get your audience involved immediately. Act number 2 is the confrontation. The confrontation is the body of the story, and it's going to take up most of the time in the story. The confrontation is a series of efforts that the storytelling is doing to try and resolve whatever the conflict was. And then we come to the resolution. The resolution is your conclusion. It wraps up the story. You walk away feeling like there's been a solution to the conflict. It doesn't have to be a happy ending, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know, especially in America, we love happy endings, and there's nothing wrong with a happy ending. It doesn't have to be a happy ending in such that the conflict has been dealt with. That doesn't mean that that's the end all. Here's the key. There are do's and there are don'ts to good storytelling. So what I'm going to have you do, let's start with the positives. I would like you to put in chat, what are the do's of good storytelling? Just put in a couple things that you know you've learned if this is something, if I'm going to tell a story, I should do this. And keep it simple, just a couple. Now, before we get to the do's, let me give you an example of storytelling. Something that is used universally and it's been used for hundreds of years. The detective story. Every culture loves the detective story. Think about the detective story. It is classic storytelling. How does a detective story start out? Well, usually someone gets killed, bang, or enter the detective. Usually a character that's flawed, he's divorced, he drinks too much, or it could be a really smart woman, but whoever the detective is now has a conflict. Someone's been murdered. There needs to be a resolution. And what happens during the movie? What happens during the book or the TV show? You have your confrontation. Now, I love don't you love how in the office, they always put up pictures and have the little lines between, okay, this people don't have an alibi, these people had a motive, and they start trying to eliminate all the different people that couldn't have done the murder to get down to who did do the murder. And this takes up by far the majority of the story. At the end, we get down to a resolution. And again, I always get a kick out of the surprise. It's the little old lady in the corner that hasn't said 20 words the entire movie, and she's the murderer. Now, one thing that's different between the detective story and your story is this. In a detective story, usually, not always, but usually, the detective's the hero. The detective figures it out. He has help, or she has help, but usually the detective is the person that solves the resolution, solves the murder. When you tell your story, it is highly recommended that you are not the hero. Something or somebody else is the hero of your story. That's a really important thing, especially in Toastmasters. It's a personal story. You want to tell personal stories, but try to avoid having yourself be the hero. Now, with that in mind, let's get down. Lori, can you read? I have my do list. I'm going to check off as we go. I think you guys got all of them, but I'm going to check off as we go.
All right, the do list. Let me go back up here. Let's see. Name the person. Keep it real.
Okay.
A strong hook. Use active verbs. Engage the audience. Make it interesting. Suspense, relatable characters.
Okay.
Active verbs. Human emotions, elements.
Yes.
Have a moral. Set the stage, relate to audience, rise and fall. It was a dark and stormy night. Suddenly a shot rang out and the maid screamed.
Somebody's reading my script. I was going to use those, but oh well, I'll have to come up with something different. What didn't we do? We alluded to this, make it relevant. One thing Toastmasters, rule number 101 in Toastmasters I was taught was know your audience. So your story may be a little bit different depending on what Toastmaster club you're in. I belong to international clubs. When I talk about working in the woods, half the people are just there with big eyes and they don't even know what a forest is. In Oregon, you can talk about working in woods and use all the terminology. You can have all kinds of fun because most people in Oregon know everything. So you got to know your audience. Elicit emotion, very important. A good story makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you think. I can't remember who said that, but to me, that's brilliant. So think about that. A good story will make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and it'll make you think. And if you can do all three of those things with your audience, yeah, you got something going on. Descriptive language is good. I don't know if anyone specifically said descriptive language or kind of worked around it. Descriptive language is good. However, this is just a pet peeve. Be careful with the 4 and 5 syllable words. We all want to impress people with big words and that we have this phenomenal vocabulary, and it is okay. But when you start spinning 4 or 5, 6 syllable words one after the other, and people have to get a dictionary, you kind of lose your audience. So just be careful with that. Use good vocabulary, know your audience, but don't overdo it with the vocabulary. And what is the biggest thing on the score sheet for the International Speech Contest? Help me out. What is it? What's
Company.
the message? The message is 50. Literally, if you look at it, 55 out of the 100 points is the message. Was the message clear? Was it effective? So telling a story is just a way to get across your message. Somebody said something about a moral. And of course, your story can have a moral. A moral is a message, it's a type of message. I'm looking at my list, and I think we did it. Now, my biggest thing, I was on Zoom long before Zoom was cool. I mean, Zoom was required. I like Zoom. However, I got to tell you, and some of you have seen my speech on this, my first contest on Zoom, I was all over the place. I was yelling and screaming and coming up here, and I thought I did really well. I had people laughing. Yeah, that speech was awesome. I'm going to win. Well, I got 4th out of 4. Talked to my mentor, and he explained to me, yeah, you were hilarious. You were by far the most entertaining speaker. You were off screen half the time, and you never once slowed down. I don't know how many cups of coffee you had before that speech, but you never once slowed down. People were wanting to laugh, but you wouldn't let them. So I learned, you got a box. We don't have a big box. However, you can utilize this box to its fullest capacity. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, I do it too. How many people have you seen do an entire 7-minute speech and they never leave the middle of the screen, ever? You would think that there was something poisonous over here or behind them. You need to use the screen. Going back to my mentor in my first online club, this is what he taught me. It's pretty simple. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm in my motorhome. I'm not at home. So I'm kind of out of my element. So I was playing around today with trying to get, number one, you want your camera at eye level, as close as you can get it. I have on my table 3 game boxes, a first alert box, a Tupperware, and a book to get my screen up here. You got to do what you got to do. And I've been fiddling with the lights in here all day trying to get my lighting somewhat to work. On one side, you mark a line. I have a chair. So I know if I go over here, I hit the chair, I'm almost off screen. Over here, believe it or not, on the floor, I have a cooler. Do what you got to do. If I hit the cooler, I know I'm just about off screen. When I come in, I'm on gallery view. I can see myself. And trust me when I tell you, I'd much rather look at you guys. But this way I know. So when I come in, now I know I'm on screen. Now you can have some fun and get all the way in there once in a while. This is the one advantage of Zoom. This is really, if you stop and think about the physical nature, the really big advantage of Zoom is you can get your expression. I'm only a few feet away from you right now. On stage, in front of a group, I'm at least 5 feet or more away from you. You can't see the expression nearly as well. So use that. Come in, make a point, get people uncomfortable. It's okay. And then back, I have a couch back here. I can't go any further. You don't want to get too far away from your audience because then they can't see you. Just for fun, let me show you a demonstration of how to use the Zoom in its entirety. It's a scene I did, my favorite scene from my favorite speech, which didn't win the contest. Wow, that's not very good. That's like saying, wow, it's no good, but I'm gonna show it to you anyway. So let me set it up. My grandfather got me a job when I was 19 in Alaska. And ladies and gentlemen, he sold me a bill of goods. It's a cannery, there is near a town and you're gonna love it. Flew on 2 airplanes to Anchorage. In Anchorage, at the airport, I was met by this large, burly man, looked like Grizzly Adams. Well, hey, city boy, follow me. He put me in what was supposed to be an airplane. This thing looked like it was about 70 years old, and the tires were almost flat. I sat in the passenger seat, and he took off, and we were rocking and rolling. I was getting thrown all over the place for 3 hours. And I hadn't seen civilization for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I was starting to freak out just a little bit. Finally, after 3 hours, he says, well, city boy, let me get you a good look at your new home. And he banked the plane and literally pasted my face into the window. And as I looked down, I saw a scattering of small buildings in the middle of nowhere. Well, city boy, there ain't no malls down there. There ain't no stores, and there sure as heck ain't no pretty women. Welcome to hell. Now, hopefully I gave you a little bit of demonstration of how to use the stage. Back off a little bit, come in, go side to side. Hey, the one thing I had to learn is you got to make your motions somewhat in slow motion, especially if you have a green screen, because when you start doing this on a green screen, it's tracers. Something like on a, well, I won't talk about that. So you have to use your movements somewhat in slow motion. And I have a hard time with that. I get excited and I start doing things. So just pay attention to that. But in order to do this, you got to get off the couch. You got to get off your behind and you got to get up. And if you don't think getting up and doing a speech is important, let's go back to the World Championship of Public Speaking. Every single one of those people was standing up. We don't even have to go that far. Just go back and watch last year's district championship. All 8 contestants were standing up. And most of them, at least the ones that consulted me, used their stage. It's important. It helps because one thing in a speech that we just talked about, the do's, you want to elicit emotion. You want to engage your audience. You want to be interesting. And when you just stand there the whole time, I don't care how good your vocal variety is, you're going to lose them. 7% of a speech is what you say. 7% is what you say. The vast majority of your message is what you do, how you say it. And yes, vocal variety obviously is important. Dialogue is a great opportunity to engage with some vocal variety. You have to exaggerate. If you're a female and you're talking to a male, you can look up. You can go to the voice, but as long as you look up, If two females are talking, you somehow have to make their voices different. Two males talking, you have to do something so it's obvious that there's two characters. I see a lot of people using dialogue these days, and it's good, but they're not playing it up so that there's two obvious characters. So have fun with it. The biggest thing when you're using your stage, put yourself on your own Zoom. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing all afternoon. I put myself on my Zoom trying to get the lighting in this place to be halfway decent. Put yourself on your own Zoom, put yourself on the view and play. Go back and forth, go sideways, play and see what you do. See to yourself what your audience is going to see. I find this fun. Because when I do a speech, I don't just think about what I say. When I write a speech, every word I write, every sentence I write, in my mind, I'm thinking, how am I going to say that? How am I going to use my Zoom screen to say that? How am I going to do my voice inflections? How am I going to come up with the different voices? So these things, it's all fun. You have to rehearse. The most impressive person I've worked with, she was a district champion in 2018, and she took a couple years off. Last year, she's in Indonesia. She got a hold of me and she said, I've done my speech in front of 15 clubs. I've been working on it for over a year. The problem is I was a district champion and nobody will be honest with me. All they tell me is, oh, Natalie, you're wonderful. I need some fresh eyes. I need you to be brutally honest. And the things I noticed, number one, her message was, it was a good message, but it wasn't real clear. Number two, she stayed in the middle of the screen vast majority of the time. And number three, and if you know me, this is a biggie, humor. Add humor. Humor is a wonderful thing. Let me talk about humor for a minute. My problem in the past was I had the attitude that all I want to do is make people laugh, which is a lot of fun. But just making people laugh doesn't cut it in terms of a message. Humor is important. You're doing humorous speech, you should have 4, 5, 6 funny things. Here's what people don't understand. When you're doing a serious speech, and I'm talking about somebody dying, losing your grandmother, losing a leg, divorce. I'm talking about really heart-wrenching stories. Humor is very important. Your audience, you got them wrapped up. You got them bummed out. You got them engaged in your pain. Give them something to laugh about every once in a while. Take the edge off, as they say. The humor is really important. And you don't have to tell jokes. Jokes are fun. Charles de Gaulle said, "He who laughs last." Didn't get the joke. Who knew the French could be funny? So a joke once in a while, I see Dan over there. Dan is a great jokester. In a Toastmaster meeting, a lot of clubs, you have a joke at the beginning to kind of lighten the mood, and that's wonderful. And it's okay to tell jokes, but you don't want your jokes to be long and you don't want to overuse it. I tell people 1, 2 at the very most, but they have to be appropriate to the message. The other thing is quotes. I paraphrased a quote to start this session. Quotes are powerful, but again, you don't want to overuse them, and they're only good if they play to the message. Okay, let's go with the don'ts. I kind of listened to some of them, but in the chat, if you would put, what are the don'ts of storytelling? I'm laughing at our district director.
What are the do's and don'ts of storytelling?
Now, this is the don't. These are the don'ts. Let's talk about You're seeing someone do a story and you're, oh my goodness, I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that. I wish this person would.
Actually, oh, let's see. Don't
See
use
it.
don't use cliches.
Okay, go ahead.
Don't be boring. Don't linger. Don't be rude. Don't let Jim tell that same story again. Don't give away the ending. And don't use too much dialogue. Don't use a person's real name. Don't back up, start again when you get the facts wrong. Be real. That's what I have so far.
I have to tell you the one about don't tell that story again. I've been living 5 years with a man who has Alzheimer's. What can I say? That's the punchline. I've heard the same story 1,000 times, maybe more. I have it somewhat memorized, actually. You want to hear it? No. So let me go through my list of don'ts. I pretty much heard all of these, but these are the ones that in my research I've come across that are really important. And I love the one, don't be boring. Well, that's obvious. But how many of us have heard boring speeches? Don't overcomplicate it. In other words, you only have 5 to 7 minutes. You're trying to produce a message. Don't try to tell us 5 different stories with 5 different plot lines. It's not a 2.5 hour movie. You got to get to your conflict. You got to get to your story. You got to stay on message. Omit irrelevant details. I call it the and then. And then we went to the store, and then I bought some groceries, and then we got back in the car, and then we went to the park, and then we did this, and then we did that. And by the time they're done, you want to pull out what little hair you got. Where you get to the point. So avoid the and thens. An occasional and then is okay, but on the third one, have someone start going like this. Avoid giving away your resolutions too early. You see this a lot. I think someone alluded to that. Don't, how do I want to put this? You want to allude to the resolution. You want to lead to the resolution, but you don't want to give it away. And surprise is always good. A surprise ending doesn't have to be a surprise, but a little surprise is always a good thing. What was that last one? Some stories start.
I put that in. I said some stories actually start at the ending, or alternatively, you could see this where they start at a point where the character seemingly is about to die, and then they have the flashback. So it's an interesting twist if it works, and there are a lot of cases that it doesn't.
It is in a 5 to 7 minute speech. You have to be really good to pull that off. And I'm not saying you shouldn't try it. You should take risks, especially at your club level. Take some risks, have some fun. But those kind of things, of course, in a movie, it's much, much easier. They have 2 hours, they have different actors. Take risks, but just be careful with it. Because in 5 to 7 minutes, you just don't have a lot of time to get too carried away with complications. And if you go into storytelling, you get on the internet, you start looking at storytelling, there are 100 different ways to tell a story. I'm trying to keep this totally relevant to the 5 to 7 minute speech and to the box. We're in a box and we got a time box. So that is a nature of the beast. And quite frankly, I really like the fact that people can tell a story in 5 to 7 minutes. You don't have to watch a 2-hour movie. As a matter of fact, one of the best things I ever saw was a guy did a speech on the Wizard of Oz. He did a 5 to 7 minute speech, and it was absolutely brilliant. He did all the voices. It was just absolutely off the chart. Okay, we've done the do's, we've done the don'ts. You guys are all experts. And notice that between you came up with everything I've talked about. The group effort. Now let's have some fun. People say to me, so I've done 100 speeches. I've told 100 stories. Some overlap and some are just flat lies. But people will say to me, Tiger, where in the world did you come up with all these stories? How many of you guys ever watched Seinfeld? What's Seinfeld? It's a show about nothing. Your stories don't have to be earth-shaking. They don't have to be someone dying. They don't have to be about a wedding. Some of the best stories at the World Championships, my favorite one, I cannot remember his name, I apologize. He told a story about having a flat tire. He won the World Championship of humorous storytelling about having a flat tire. That is not an earth-changing, amazing story, although the message was good. I still remember it, even though it was 5, 6 years ago. Sometimes it's a good idea to ask for help. Last year, he talked about when he was a kid trying to fix a projector. Again, it's a pretty simple concept. Every day is a story. Yeah, you look at your life and you go, yeah, my life's boring. It doesn't really, it doesn't really do anything. Well, maybe, but you've gone on vacation. When you're a kid, you did crazy things. I know when you're a teenager, you did some things. You've dated, you've done all kinds of stuff. Now, you may not have done all the crazy things I did, working in the woods and so on and so forth, playing sports. But I guarantee every one of you has at least a dozen stories in here, at least, that have a message. Now, the question is, okay, so Tiger, I got 12 stories. How do I get them out? How do I know which ones to tell? Start with a story that you like. Start with something that happened to you or that you did, something that was important, perhaps humorous, maybe it's really serious, but something that affected you, something that had emotion. It made you cry, it made you laugh, it made you think. One of the three or all three of the three is even better. So here we go. Back to the chat. Put in the chat a story, either a story that you told, a story that you want to tell, a story that someone else told that you thought was really good. Put in a storyline. Any storyline will do. Where's Kristen? Where are you, Kristen? Are you hiding? There she is, the blue hat. That's hilarious. We got plenty of time, so go ahead. David, you're a little bit overcomplicated.
I like overcomplicated, but then again, you don't know the full story. Okay, I'll hit you something simpler.
It's okay. One thing, I don't know if I actually said it or not, but one thing that's really important about storytelling, especially in story masters and Toastmasters, is personal stories. Personal stories are money. You can tell a story about your mentor, but how your mentor affected you, or about your mom. But personal stories are money. Oh, okay, Lori, what do we have behind door number 1?
All right, let's just see here. Well, you already said it. The dishes were dirty. The world tree disappears, causing chaos among the inhabitants of the world who relied upon it. A night on patrol. I was on patrol for my college security team one Halloween night when all hell broke loose. My wife putting cream on her face. As a caregiver, you enjoy the groundhog days. My variant days are bad days. The suitcase flew off the car. On our way to trade in our old car, the sunroof suddenly blew off onto the freeway. We got lost in the woods. How I lost my driver's license. My dog running through a glass window just to chase a cat. A tow truck stopped. My dad was not a spook. I hit a golf ball into a hole, only to learn that the hole was a nest of yellow jackets.
You know, this is good stuff. We got lost in the woods. Let's go with that one. And that's something I think we're all Oregonians we can relate to, or we know somebody. We got lost in the woods. Now, give me one failed resolution, one confrontation. In other words, something you did that didn't solve your problem. So you got lost in the woods. Think about it for a minute. Like I say, time is of no essence. We got plenty of time. Think about for a second, someone got lost in the woods. I used to be in search and rescue, and I can tell you stories about stuff that people do when they get lost. It's just flabbergasting. You got lost in the woods. What did these people do that did not resolve the issue? Okay, Lori, what do we got for resolutions?
All right, here. Let's see. We tried to find our way back, but the initial failed. They panicked. I panicked, confused that it was either to go left or right. I started to cry, then got thirsty. Climbed a tree to find the way out. Got lost in the woods and locked my keys in the car. I wandered around in a panic. I took a nap. I clutched my phone in panic and only had 3% battery left. What if they tow my car and I'm stuck here in the woods? Raced through my mind. The person called someone who yammered at the poor lost soul until his battery died. Then he couldn't tell the person he was lost.
The lumberjack lost the map.
Well, I can relate to a couple of those. I've gone backpacking and come out up a dirt road about 10 miles and had a dead battery. But search and rescue, oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, I could sit here and tell you stories. It's amazing what stupid things that people do. You have a car, the car gets stuck in the snow. You drove up a road. Now, what's the logic? You drove up a road. Wouldn't you think that you would just try to walk back down the road? People get out of the car and go sideways into the brush. I don't know. It's kind of a hard one to explain. Anyway, so you have all these failed resolutions, and that's a great speech. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go back. I told one of those a long time ago, but none of you guys have ever heard it. So I'm going back to that one. Getting lost in the woods is a great story. Here's another thing. You can tell it like it's your story, but it can be someone else's story. You can tell a story from a great movie, from a great book. So if you can't come up with ideas for your own, if you're that boring, you just can't think of anything that I did that would interest people, find a book. You've all read lots of books. You heard your grandfather tell stories. Your crazy uncle probably had some great stories. You like he did in Seinfeld and buy his stories. Hey, grandpa, I'll give you $100 if I can have all your stories. So have fun with it. Have fun. Come up with stories. Come up with failed resolution. This is your opportunity to laugh at yourself. Failed resolution is a beautiful, perfect place to put in self-deprecating humor. Do something stupid. Probably you don't have to make up anything. Just tell about when you did something stupid. For me, that's really easy. Don't have to think very long. And then come up with a resolution that makes sense. And again, happy endings are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a sad guy. I like happy endings. We all do. But it doesn't have to be the perfect ending. Quite frankly, I really don't like an ending where it sounds like, oh, now everything's perfect. Because everything's never perfect. It's just, okay, that challenge was taken care of. Now I'm wiser. I'll move on to the next challenge. Let me wrap this up. Storytelling, just like telling a speech, you don't have to change the structure. The beginning, act 1, the conflict. The body, act 2, the confrontation. The conclusion, act 3, the resolution. Just like writing a speech. There's really no different other than the fact that you're gearing your message to a story. I think that personal stories are the way to go. You can tell stories about other people, but it works better if you tell stories about other people in a way it impacted you in some way. Like a mentor. If you're going to talk about a mentor or a protege, that's okay. I'm totally okay with that. But talk about how it impacted you. I think that's more powerful. And again, going back to the champions, you watch them almost to the person, it's a story about themselves. Laugh at yourself. Use your stage. Have some fun. Use your stage. Laugh at yourself. Keep it interesting. Keep it relevant to your audience. The biggest thing, the most important thing, if you don't take anything else away from today, you gotta have fun with it. Toastmasters is a great way to learn, but have fun with it. Always my philosophy has been you can laugh and you can learn at the same time. As a matter of fact, I think that if you don't laugh a little bit, the learning doesn't happen the way it should. My personal opinion. So have fun with it. Thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for using the chat. Thank you for engaging. Hopefully you had as much fun as I did. Hopefully you learned something. Wow, what a concept. Hopefully you go away from here and go tell a story.
Thank you, Tiger. That's great. Does anybody have questions for him? Like to raise your hand, Kristen?
I wanted you to clarify, you said if you don't have your own story, take someone else's, but then how do you not be the hero? It's about you. I mean, can you parse that out a little bit?
Well, you make it like it's your story. And then because that person, yeah, that's, you gotta like get into that person's brain and make it like you're the person. And when you look at that story, who saved that person or what was the resolution? You can be the hero. I'm not saying you can't be the hero. It's just a highly discouraged. But if you make yourself the hero, don't come off as being arrogant. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah, look at me. I solved my own problem. Aren't I great? That really doesn't play to your audience all that much. So just what I do, honestly, is I embellish. I have a story, but I also have a lot of friends that have stories. And so I add something that happened to them into my story just to make my story a little better. And I've had friends go, hey, my brother's done this to me a couple times. Hey, that was my story. I go, well, not anymore.
So when you're telling a story, sometimes you're justified in creating some BS and lying your way through the story.
I believe in exaggeration. I believe in embellishing. Absolutely. Your audience doesn't know. Well, they probably will figure it out, but embellishment. Think about storytelling in the past. They didn't have books, so they told stories. Well, you know, every generation the story got better. You know, Grandpa went out and cut down a tree. Well, by the time it gets to the third generation, Grandpa went out and cut down the entire forest. So yes, embellishment, I think embellishment is, it's fun. You have to be careful. You don't want to overdo it, obviously.
And it depends on your audience. If it's
You
a
gotta
time
know
group.
your, yeah, you gotta know your audience. Like I say, my speeches in Oregon are much different than they are when I'm doing it international. Let me share this with you. How many of you write your story? You sit down and you actually scribble it out or you put it on your computer. How many of you do that? Most people. And I'm totally okay with that. I've never written a story. I've never written a story. Here's the thing. You think that that's crazy, and it is kind of crazy. My problem, if I write it, when I'm telling it, I see it on paper. If I don't write it, all I do is think about how I'm going to say it. So when you write your story, think about not just what you're going to say, but how you're going to say it. That's really the critical thing. How are you going to say it? Where are you going to be in the Zoom camera? Because the delivery is about 90% of the show.
Hey, Tiger.
I've been told that the best liars make the best storytellers. Is that true in your opinion?
And of course, that's the truth. It's not so much lying as it is omitting certain facts.